You know, one of the things that I find fascinating and simultaneously challenging is the number of people who look at some of the concepts, philosophies, like core values, principles, morals, and they say, like they've recently said of our Constitution here in the United States, or our Declaration of Independence here in the United States, or our Bill of Rights, those are outdated. That's so old-fashioned. We don't need that stuff anymore. And what I want to remind you of is that it's not old-fashioned. It's not outdated. In fact, it's not just old school. It's foundational. It's foundational. That's what I want to talk about today. It's a really important question to ask. Why wasn't the microphone on? That's a really important question because I'm the only one responsible for that. The question that I want you to ponder, though, is when all of these cars plug in, when all these cars plug in at the end of the night, when people come home from work, or maybe they work a night shift and they come home in the morning and they plug their car in, from whence cometh the electricity? But this is a really simple question, I think. When we think about all the cars in the world today, the majority of them run on fossil fuel. Some run on both fossil fuel and electricity, and the promise is that the fossil fuel recharges the electricity, whether it's through the braking system or movement or whatever else, and so they don't have to be charged as often, but the batteries still have to be charged or replaced. And so the question is, from whence cometh the electricity that these cars will be plugged into overnight? Okay, my ideas are not old school just for the sake of being old school. My ideas, my philosophies, my moral values, these are not based on some old-fashioned desire to not catch up with the times. In fact, believe it or not, I actually went to school for electronics engineering. I actually won the science fair when I was a junior and a senior in high school. And one of those years, I won the overall science fair for a project I did on physics called the car of the future. Yeah, electric and water. What? Yeah, everybody said it wouldn't work then because, the fossil fuel people will put you out of business. And we've seen that to be true for a lot of people. But it was a project I abandoned. It didn't even matter. It's an old idea. It's outdated, like today's Constitution, right? No, these old ideas They're foundational. They're not outdated. They're not old. They're not just old school. They're there for a reason. And the reason they're there is because they worked. And what does that have to do with electric cars? Well, it only has to do with electric cars in this. There are a lot of people in leadership who feel like, as a leader, I've got to keep up with the times. I've got to move with the times. I've got to do what they say is the newest thing, the newest trends, whether it's diversity, inclusion, or stop using the word. Let me unpack that for you. And all of those they're important things, yes, and we should be up to date with the times, so to speak. We should be current with the people around us. We should have an idea what they're talking about, what's important to them. It dawned on me just yesterday that, well, kind of slowly dawned on me. The idea has been in my head for a while, but I think I finally put it together in a package worth distributing yesterday in my mind, and that is, as I was going through an old thrift shop, guess what I was doing? In an old thrift store. I was buying old books. Why? Because I love old books. I love to collect old books. Some of these are from as far back as 1939 about global politics, written as a story from a first-hand group of people who were there. That's going to be some fascinating reading. Anyway, so as I'm going through this, what I find is on the bargain basement shelf, 25 bucks or 25 cents each, pick anything you want to. There's an entire basket. I didn't buy these. I was tempted. An entire basket of Reader's Digest. I don't know how many of you even remember Reader's Digest. Maybe your grandparents had Reader's Digest, perhaps in the loo or in the restroom, and right, a little stack of magazines right there. Because before the days of, if you had your cell phone and you had unlimited data and you had a power plug, a teenage boy could be in the bathroom for hours if they have their cell phone and a data plan or Wi-Fi in the house and a power plug, because otherwise your battery's going to go dead or you're going to get bored. But see, Reader's Digest has been replaced. Well, what was it about Reader's Digest? Well, Reader's Digest was based on the reality that a lot of people will not take time to read a book this fat. This is just 230 pages or so. But most people won't take the time to read a book like that, and they're certainly not going to do it in one setting. But if you give them stories that are brief, that are short, that are powerful and impactful, that kind of challenge, and encourage the way that you think, well, then you could have some daily positive highlights. You could have several little stories that you could read the entire story in maybe 3 minutes or so. And today, that concept seems outdated. Or is it? See, the concept hasn't changed. The ability to plant seeds in somebody's head, no, that hasn't gone away. The ability to cause someone to think in a certain way or think about certain things as important and other things as, well, less important. None of that has gone away. The stories about people and their lives and the little aha moments, those haven't gone away. The images of maybe a car accident and a hero, those haven't gone away. They've gone to the phone. Yeah, see, they're all right here. They're all right here. Reader's Digest today is a Facebook story, a TikTok, maybe a YouTube reel. But the idea hasn't gone away. See, when you look at ideas, principles, moral values, things upon which we make decisions, they're not outdated. They're not even old-fashioned or old-schooled as you may perceive them to be, meaning they're so old they're worthless now. No, you'd be fascinated. There are some car shows right now on various places, Netflix and Hulu and others, that if you watch these car shows, sometimes they challenge themselves to go to a junkyard, find the oldest car they can, and make it run again. Let me ask you a question. 25 years from now, will we be doing that with battery-operated cars when they have a destructive half-life of hundreds of thousands of years? When once the battery is dead, the car is pretty much done because the battery itself is like 35 to 40% of the car as far as the cost is concerned? I mean, no, see, these old cars, these old guys will go into a junkyard where it looks like the doors would fall off this car if you tried to open it. And they'll open the hood and they look for three things. Does it have fuel? Does it have fire? And is it getting air? And if those things exist, spark, air, yeah, all of a sudden you've got an engine that runs. Now you may have to tweak the transmission a little bit. You may have to put a little grease in those axles. You may have to do a little something with those flat tires. But there's a really good chance that if the basics, the foundation, that cast iron block and all of its truly metal pieces are still in place, you can make it work again. I know there are a lot of people who are saying, what in the world does all this have to do with leadership? And I'm going to tell you, there are some things about leadership that have been abandoned. There are some things about leadership that have been overlooked, steered away from. Some newfangled ideas have come in. And by newfangled, I'm not necessarily slamming them, although some of them are absolutely ludicrous. I am saying, though, that there are some old-fashioned ideas, like that cast iron motor and all of its metal parts. There are some ideas to leadership, principles and core values, moral values, things that we should be, things that we should be making decisions on. And those things are very important. And those things we can't just dismiss as old-fashioned and outdated. We can't just say, well, they used to work really well, but they don't work anymore. Because let me tell you something, the process, the mental process of training up a mind hasn't changed since humans did. The way that we lead people, changing the stories that they tell in their own lives, changing the stories that they tell others around their lives, all of those things, they still work. The question isn't, do they work? Or even how well do they work? But instead, what is the vehicle that you're using to deliver them? Today, it may not be Reader's Digest. It may not be the Our Daily Bread 3-minute read. It may not be the morning newspaper. But I can tell you this, when I get up every morning, my digital device goes right to the updates. Some news, some political, some spiritual, some relational, and I go right to my news feed on different platforms, and I listen to what's going on. My grandpa used to sit around the coffee table or around the kitchen table with 2 or 3 cups of coffee over the course of reading through the headlines, but he would peel through the headlines and read the headlines and then read about the stories of the things going on, and then of course the obituaries, because he was an old dude and that's what old dudes do. But the idea of conveying that knowledge, that wisdom, that what's going on in the world today, it's foundational. It hasn't gone away. It's not old school. It's just been revamped. And it may not be the newspaper, it may not be Our Daily Bread, it may not be Reader's Digest, but it's out there. It's on TikTok. It's on YouTube. It's on Reels. On just about every platform. So here's the question I have for you. As a leader, are you still stuck in old-fashioned ways? Are you still trying to influence, trying to persuade, trying to impart those very important moral values, those core values, those principles? Are you still trying to impart those to the people whose life you have influence in, but using outdated modes and methods? Oh, they still work. Yeah, you can still write with cursive on a card and drop it in the mail to people. You'd be amazed how novel that is to a young person to receive a greeting card in the mail or a thank you card in the mail. You could rock their world with that because it's not lost in the crowd of TikTok. But if you've abandoned the marketplace of TikTok or social media for the sake of trying to stay relevant in your old-fashioned ways, you might be missing the boat. I want to challenge you to ask yourself those questions. Have I given up on the things that I believe to be foundational in my leadership and in the lives of the people that I lead? Have I abandoned those things, maybe even to the idea that there's a new technology and it's not my bailiwick? I'm going to let somebody else have that domain. Because if you have, then there's a real good chance that the principles, the values, the moral values and core values that you operate by, that you insist of, that you insist on, of those that you lead, you've abdicated them. I think there's a real good chance that what you intend to impart to people isn't getting through because of the noise in the environments that you avoid. I challenge you, stop avoiding them. Get engaged in them. Jump into TikTok or Instagram or Facebook or whatever social media you need to, so that the message of your principal core values, your moral values, your foundational values remains relevant. I'm J Loren Norris with Leading Leaders Podcast for Tell It Like It Is TV. Have a blessed day.